While not considered something that Jews typically partake in, did you know that drinking happens or can happen during mourning? Well, that's something we're going to discuss on this episode of The Jewish Drinking Show, bringing L'chaim to life. So something we're going to be going through the course of this is drinking during mourning. But before we get into proper mourning, there is actually, so this first sheet I passed out is this intermediary period that I don't know that we have a word for this in English, but the word in Hebrew is Aninut. Aninut. So one who is an onain is in a state of Aninut. And it's this sort of like, I don't know, if I were to call it something, it'd be like this stage of like just utter shock. And you're now needing to, basically it's this period between the death of a person and their burial. So it's this period. And really, just as a sort of a broad overview, although you'll get to see some sense about it in the sources, but a broad overview is the focus for the close relatives or the people associated with this person are to bury them. We do not valorize in Judaism leaving someone's corpse out for a long time. We strive to hasten to bring the corpse to a proper place and to bury them. So this period is actually something that's characterized by not drinking. So this is, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, I came across someone put together some sort of package of sources of whenever you see this pairing of meat and wine, when do you see meat and wine together? And I think we might be familiar, we think about 9 days, right? We abstain from meat and wine except for Shabbat, meat and wine, and they're put together. This is another pairing on a happier note. For holiday, for Chagim, we have meat and wine. We have, that's a great pairing because there's a certain happiness, simcha, happiness to it. And similarly with the 9 days, it's the exact opposite. And so too here, you don't really have the time. You're not really supposed to be really in the headspace to be enjoying yourself. This is not the time. And so here what we have, it's a brisa. It's an early rabbinic text. I'm not going to go through in everything. What I will point out is it says, Ve'eno ochel basar ve'eno shosa yain ve'eno mevarach ve'eno mezamin. There's a whole bunch of things that you're actually not supposed to. So you're not drinking wine, you're not eating meat, but you're also, this is really fascinating. You're not doing Berakhot Hamazon. You're not doing a zimun. There's also a bunch of other things you don't have to do. You don't have to do Kriyat Shema. You don't have to do Tefillah. You don't have to do Tefillin. I mean, it's such a different existence, right? You're literally taken out of your normal existence. Not only you're not drinking wine and not eating meat, but you're not davening necessarily. You're not laying Tefillin. You're not doing Berakhot Hamazon and a zimun. It's just such a different state of existence. Weirdly, later on, so down here it says, what about Shabbat? It was Shabbat. So you do eat meat, you do drink wine. You're taking part in Berakhot Hamazon and Zimun. So you're doing regular stuff, so to speak, on Shabbat. You're sort of like brought back into the world, even if briefly. Maybe this person close to you died on Friday, you just weren't able to bury them. You sort of put a pause. You enjoy your Shabbat, but then, after Shabbat, then you have to go back to endeavoring to make an appropriate burial for the person. So, but if I had to describe it, I would say, you're sort of in a state of shock. You're focused, right? You got to get this person to where they need to be. And this is an important rabbinic text. This is the corresponding section in the Shulḥan Arukh, which is, I think it's in the third paragraph. You don't eat meat, you don't drink wine. You're not eating meat, you're not drinking wine. You're also not doing all these other things. You're not doing the zimun, you're not doing Berakhot Hamazon, 5/8 of the way or 9/16 of the way down. We see, and on the Shabbats or festivals, eats meat and drinks wine. Then parenthetically, if they want to, meaning you're not forced to drink wine or eat meat. And who knows, maybe you're not in the mood. You're sort of in this sort of in between, sort of situation, not only with getting the person buried, but even I think your emotional state, like you're not even really sure where you're at. So you're sort of like in between. The bottom does mention, what if there's a student and for their teacher, you can't eat meat or drink wine as long as they're laying out in front of you. Okay, but so basically, what I think what's kind of strange to some degree about this is that I'm used to, and something we're going to, spoiler alert, something we're going to see later is there are debates on certain things. And certainly for a lot of Jewish practice, there are debates, there's commentary, blah, 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 blah. There isn't for this. It's straightforward, okay? You got to get the person buried. This really isn't the time for drinking. So now we're moving on to proper mourning. And when I mean mourning, okay, we do know there's Shivah, there's also Shloshim, and there's the first year and so forth. We're really focused on specifically Shivah for the remainder of our conversation, which is drinking. So mourning and drinking. So we're starting off with the rabbis. Obviously, we're going to be doing some post-rabbinic stuff. For those who know me, I love my Chazal, I love my Talmudic stuff, and really, I don't say this about every topic, so I am not beating the same drum all the time. I will tell you for mourning, the Talmud, the rabbinic stuff is very important. It's like really the central conversation around this, because after this, it's, I'll just keep things in mind. There's really, I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, or definitely foreshadowing. There is one word. Everything that we're about to see revolves and hinges upon one word that the medieval rabbis then debate. So, and that changes all Jewish practice forever, henceforth, about drinking during mourning. Because, rabbis. So, but I want to set up a little bit of, context. So, even though I like to do things in chronological order, rabbinic text number 1 is decidedly out of chronological order. It's actually a 3rd century text, and then we're going to go backwards into some 2nd or even 1st century texts.
Well, the Katan said, wine was created only in order to comfort mourners and to reward the wicked, as it is stated, give strong drink to him that is ready to perish, and wine to the bitter of soul. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his misery no more.
Thank you.
That's what we call Proverbs.
Right. So there's 2 things going on here. So to fully appreciate what Rabbi Ḥanin's doing, it's important for us to go back into the Proverbs text here, which is it is Mishlei, and really fascinatingly, one of the unfortunate, terrible things that has happened in translations is that everybody is very uncomfortable translating that delicious beverage called beer. But they're uncomfortable calling it beer. So in the biblical verse, it's Tenu Shechar Lo'oved, give beer to someone who is, they've lost themselves or whatever. V'yayin Lamari Nafesh, and wine to the bitter of spirit. Now, for anybody who is familiar with, knows Mishlei, there's a lot of these, like, in any given verse, sort of these doublings, where they'll say something basically the same way. I'm sorry, they'll say one thing in the first half of the verse and basically say the exact same thing, but just a little bit different in the latter half of the verse. Here, you're using 2 different expressions of alcoholic beverages and, similarly situated people and distressed experiences. I find utterly fascinating that you do not give beer to someone who is mare nafesh, that is bittered of spirit. Why not? Because beer is already bitter, right? You don't give the bitter drink to the bitter person. You give wine to the bitter person and beer to the other person, which is just, I find that so incredibly fascinating. Anyways, that's just a cute little alcohol in Tanakh tidbit, right? Look, beer only appears like 22 times in all of Tanakh, and this is one of them, so I had to play on that. But, okay, fine, you have this verse in Mishlei. It says, give beer to this person or give wine to that person, fine. But it's not specifically someone who's in mourning. Rabbi Ḥanin here in the 3rd century picks up and it says, look, it's really fascinating the way he says, Lo nivra yain elo l'nachim avelim v'shalom. This is the only reason that this was created. Were it not for these people, we wouldn't have such things. Now, I don't know if that's really a thing, but it's certainly a fascinating, like, giving meaning to these beverages. Why do we have alcoholic beverages? We don't have any answer aside from, this is really it. Like in rabbinic literature, this is the reason that we have these things. If it weren't for comforting mourners and this other one, which is really weird, it's like giving reward to wicked people. Like, I guess that needs to be their reward is getting drunk. Okay, fine. Like, but that this is a reason that wine should have been created in the first place, in order to comfort mourners. I do not think that if you read any contemporary mourning manual, you'll ever come across this line, and that is not a value espoused that, yeah, it's a good thing we have alcoholic beverages. Okay, mazel tov, feel free to comfort yourself through this.
So depressed and horrible, load up on the alcohol.
Right. But clearly, So what this, I think, is a really great introduction into rabbinic stuff, because this really, sure, he's coming a little bit later than the text that we're seeing, but it's certainly something that would come out of the rabbinic era that we would not see in our days. Rabbinic text 2 here, this is actually the first part of a much longer text, which, spoiler alert, later on, it then talks about something that we're all familiar with, is why do Jews not have fancy coffins, is ultimately, I think it was Roman Gamliel or Roman Shimon ben Gamliel said, we don't need to do fancy stuff. But I'm just going to read the first 2 lines here really quickly. At first, they would serve wine in the mourner's house, the wealthy in white glass and the poor in colored glass, and the poor were embarrassed. So the sages institute that all should serve drinks in colored glass due to the honor of the poor. And then
third glass or white?
It was probably Levana. I don't know. I guess it was clear. I don't know. Whatever it was a fancier, it was a higher quality of glass. Clearly, there's delineation of quality, and we see there's like 5 or 6 different. Trust me, it continues on the next page. I'm not including it here, but it just keeps continuing. There's all these distinctions during the mourning process, and people are already feeling bad, right? Like you just lost a loved one, and now you're feeling, okay, I'm on a different socioeconomic level. And so the sages said, look, this doesn't need to be a time of ostentatiousness. Like you can tone it down a level. You just lost a loved one. Like this, it's not inappropriate for you to tone it down and be humble at this time. So it's not, no one's really losing much out on this, aside from, I don't know, maybe people making fancy things, but you know, it's a nice, it's sort of a leveling of the plane. Like it's a leveling of the plane. It's a tough time for everybody at this, you know, you lost your loved one. But now look, we can talk about the socioeconomic pieces and how this is really lovely and you know, equalizing. That's not my focus here. My focus really is they serve wine in the mourner's house. Right? Before we start getting ourselves lost and what does this mean socially and socioeconomically, this is great. They were drinking. And this is assumed that you have glasses for the mourner's house. How could you not? Now, I'm going to share something else that's not included in here. There's a whole bunch of, in the Mishnah, in the Tosefta, all these things about drinking in the mourner's house. Like this is assumed. But it's more like sort of just ambient text that's just talking about, okay, yeah, you're like when you're bringing some, your flask of wine to a mourner's house. It's actually so fascinating because it seems exotic to us. Like who goes to a mourner's house with a bunch of wine? Like so reading that, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just so struck by this. Like that was assumed that's how you did back in Rabbinic era. Rabbinic text 3 and 4 are the key texts for this entire conversation. They're actually similar. As you can see, one is from Talmud Yerushalmi, one's from Talmud Bavli. They have some differences. They're for the most part, similar.
It is stated 10 cups, 1 drinks. It is stated 10 cups, 1 drinks in the house of a mourner, 2 before the meal, chamisha b'toch hamazon, 5 during the meal, shlosh la'achar hamazon, and 3 after the meal. Elu shlosha shel achar hamazon. These are the 3 after the meal. Echad levrichat hamazon, 1 for Berakhot hamazon. Echad legemilot chasadim, 1 for gemilot chasadim, 1 for those who exercise charity. Echad letanchume avelim, and 1 for those who would console mourners. Kishemet Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel hosifu, and when Shimon ben Gamliel died, they added another hosifu alehem od shlosha. They added another 3. Echad lechazon lehaKnesset, 1 for the chazan of the community. Echad lerosh haKnesset, 1 for the head of the community. Echad leRabban Gamliel, and 1 for Rabban Gamliel. V'chevan shiro b'veit din shehayu mishtakrin. When the rabbinical authorities saw that they were getting drunk, v'holchim gazru alehem v'chazrum limkomam. They decreed and returned it to the original status. Did they really have to wait to see that they were getting drunk?
They are diluting these wines, right? They're in the Greco-Roman sphere of influence culturally. So whether it's they're cutting it, when they talk about 10 glasses of wine, that'd be, I don't know, somewhere between 3 and 5 for us. Right. So that's,
A bottle for us.
You're right. 3 to 5, you're feeling good. But imagine you're throwing 3 extra glasses. You're making it 4 to 6. Definitely feeling better.
At least there was a meal there.
Right. So that is fascinating, as Yair points out, that you have. Look, I mean, you have initially 2 before the meal, 5 during the meal, 3 after the meal, and the 3 after the meal is 1 for the great. Right. So you have these 10. Yeah.
So we're looking at my brain at first is looking at a glass like this, Kos, but in reality, the Kos might have been like
it's a few
4 ounces.
Yeah.
Not necessarily 10 or 12.
Right.
So we're talking about diluted, and the Kos was a normal size, not my size.
Right. I mean, you're still going to have 3, 4, maybe even 5 glasses for their 10. So it's a nice amount. But once you add a few, so here when it says, then they added 3 more. Rabbi Gamaliel, Rabbi Shimon Gamaliel, depending on which text you use. Once he died, they said, let's do a few more. And then the rabbis noticed, this is becoming a problem. But here's what's fascinating. I think it was more of they're instituting like you got to have 13 cups. Okay, but it's fascinating. The rabbis realizing that people were getting drunk didn't happen at 10. It was only when they added the 3. 10 was okay, but 13 is a bridge too far. Now you've gone too far. And so the rabbi said, we can't mandate people to get drunk in mourning. By the way, when we go back to that first text, okay, give the strong drink to people, mazel tov. But it's one thing to make people drink and even drink some more, but the rabbis saw it as being too far to ensure getting drunk. They said, maybe we shouldn't make people drunk every day. Now, what is this meal? Maybe it was a meal a day. I don't know, a meal or 2 a day. You're there. It's the Shivah house. It's nice to have drinks, but getting drunk every single time you have a meal, okay.
Amarula, Vamrele b'matnita tana. So Ula said, and said that it came from a Braita. 10 כוסות תקנו חכמים בבית האבל. 10 cups were instituted in the house of a mourner. 3 קודם אכילה כדי לפתוח בני מאב. 3 cups prior to the meal in order to open his intestines. Get the juice.
Yeah.
To get it flowing. 3 בתוך אכילה כדי לשרות אכילה שבמאב. 3 during the meal to soak the food in the juices. 4 לאחר אכילה, and 4 after the meal. 1 כנגד הזן. 1 corresponds to the first blessing who feeds all. 1 כנגד הזן את הכל, okay. ו1 כנגד ברכת הארץ, 1 corresponding to blessing of the land. 1 כנגד בוני ירושלים, 1 for who built Jerusalem. 1 כנגד הטוב ומיטיב, he who is good and does good. הוסיפו להם 4, and then they added 4 onto those. 1 כנגד חזני העיר, 1 for the חזנים, ו1 כנגד פרנסי העיר, and 1 for the people who the action leaders of the city, okay. 1 כנגד בית מקדש, 1 for the temple, ו1 כנגד רבן גמליאל. 1 noting רבן גמליאל. התחילו, שותים ומשתכרים, החזירו הדבר ליושנה. And as they started to drink all this and getting drunk, the sages restored the matter to its previous status and said, no more. 1 drink and that's it.
What?
I don't know. They didn't say 1.
They said, let's go back to how it was.
Let's go back to how it was.
It is fascinating because both the Bavli and the Yerushalmi talk about 10. That's such comment. Both the Bavli and the Yerushalmi both talk about 10 as being the original status. Different breakdowns, though. We saw in the Yerushalmi it was 2 before, whereas in the Bavli it's 3 before. In the Bavli we see it's 3 both during the meal and before the meal. In the Yerushalmi it's 2 before the meal, 5 during the meal, and then it's 3 after the meal, and then 4 after the meal of Bavli. Whatever it is, a whole bunch are during the meal, but you ultimately have 10, right? That's the original starting point. And then you have a little bit of a difference, whether it's 3 extra in the Yerushalmi or 4 extra in the Bavli. Okay, but 13 versus 14, that is not a big difference. And also, it is fascinating, they both agree that whether it's the final one, whether it's that 13th or the 14th, it's for Rabban Gamliel. We have the Chazanim, we have the leaders, and then the Bavli also has for the temple. It's also fascinating that it's when he dies, right? So this is clearly a leader of the Jewish people, a rabbinic leader of the Jewish people. They're like, he's dead. I don't really know what's going on. That why him and not another rabbi, like, why not his son or the previous leader? Like, why only him? Why only at that time? I don't know. It is funny that that's what triggers this change. And they're like, yeah, I mean, 10 was good. Well, let's do a few more. Let's tie a few more on.
After he died, or right when he died?
Yes.
Or
Oh,
sometime later.
well, actually, no. Actually, this is really fascinating. In the Bavli, by the way, in the Bavli, it doesn't tell you what triggered this change. It says Hosif Aleim, but in the Yerushalmi it says Uchshemei Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, that this was the catalyst. This is what triggered them to add them. In the Bavli, we have there's no historical trigger to affect this change. What they just added, man. Who knows? Maybe they said, 10 was good. I hear you. 10 was good, but let's just make it better. Like, we have a good thing going. Why not do more of it? And then rabbis being who they are, they're like, and we can give meaning to each one. Hey there, I wanted to break in yet again. Although I asked for support in financial ways because it does cost some money to make the hosting happen and other aspects of Jewish drinking happen. So your financial support is definitely appreciated. And don't forget, you can go to jewishdrinking.com/donate. But also, another way of supporting the show and everything that Jewish Drinking does is also to tell your friends, tell your neighbors. If you like this content, if you like this show, maybe people also like it. So feel free to let them know, hey, I have this interesting episode I heard, or a few episodes, or whatever it is, or even a few clips. Feel free to share with your friends. All right, thank you so much. Now back into the show. We're now going to go do two separate things on post-Talmudic texts. Next one is lengthier, but this one I think is a good start for us considering these post-Talmudic texts. So we have these Rashis, and the first four of these, he explains what these all correspond to and all that great stuff. Text 5, he says, what is this liyoshna? What is this original status? Okay, yeah, 10 was one thing, but having the 4 extra, that's what contributed to the drunkenness, and they had to go back, they had to revert back to just simply 10. That's what Rashi says. Rambam, he says, Ein shosin beveis aval yeter al asara kosos l'chol achav echad. Nobody should be drinking more than 10 at a mourner's house. Shloshim koda achila, 3 prior to the eating. Shloshim b'tocha achila, 3 amidst the meal. Arba lachar achila, 4 after eating. V'lo yisif shema yishtaker. Nobody should be adding lest you get drunk. Now, this is fascinating. I'll tell you why. This is different than, first of all, the way I would read it. This is the Talmudic text is also different than the way Rashi read it. What is this? What Rashi is saying, let's just go back to the 10 statutory cups of wine that should be consumed by a mourner at the mourner's house. Okay, fine. Rambam here, it's not that you have 10 and then who knows what happens after 10. The way I read the Talmudic text is they had 10, everybody was great. They had 14, people were getting drunk. Now, did people have problems with that? Who are we to say? We do not know if this was a problem or not. We really don't know. Okay? The rabbi said, people are getting drunk. We cannot let this continue. We need to change it. We need to revert it. So, that's problem solved. Now, there's all sorts of different people, right? You could have the people who are fine with drinking 10 or 14 or whatever, and there's no problems. But think about this also. We know people in our lives, in our own contemporary lives, that this is really hard to do all this drinking. Even on Seder night, there's a lot to drink. Oh my goodness, this is. Some people have some people have problems drinking all this stuff. This is more than they're used to. It can be a hardship, right? So. We read this, by the way, we even see this in Gemara. They talk about these rabbis, they drink these 4 cups at the Seder and they don't drink again until the next Seder. Like they just drink is just not part of their lives. You don't want to mandate more than 10, but people can have more than 10. They want to have 15. Enjoy yourself. The way I want to characterize the way to the understanding, what is this that the rabbis are doing when they put it back? Now, according to Rashi, it's just that they went back to 10 because yeah, if you want to drink more, fine. If you are uncomfortable drinking more than 10 glasses of wine at a mourner's house, great. Guess what? You don't have to do that. You want to do whatever. You do the 10, you can check the box, mazel tov. You want to have more? Mazel tov. However, Rambam, this is a hard stop. This is a ceiling. He says, you know what, the 10, you do 10, you don't do more. And Rambam finds it problematic to get drunk here, right? Rambam doesn't understand that getting drunk is a problem the way that maybe Rashi or I understand the Gemara to be saying. You cannot institute everybody getting drunk. You cannot legislate people to get drunk when they're in mourning. That is a problem. Rashi seems to be saying it's okay if you, on your own, volitionally want to get drunk afterwards. That's your decision. You're in mourning. Okay. Rambam says you're going to have your 10 cups, but you're not going to have more. And having more is a problem because you're going to get drunk. And, so for Rambam, the drunkenness is a problem. For Rashi, he's more or less fair about this.
Rambam's novella on Ketubot 8b, turning the matter to the origin, Rashi explained back to 10, so there is to explain it as they nullified all 10 of them, since there's also some drunkenness, and similarly, mourners to drink amidst the meal for their needs, thus they nullified all of the enactments.
Yes, that's the 13th century, that's Ramban.
Well, Rashi explained that they went back to 10. But the correct understanding of this reversion is to its original number, which was that they nullified all of them, and the mourner is not supposed to drink, unless it helps, since one can still get drunk off of 10 cups of wine.
All right, thank you. So now these two texts here are 13th century texts, these texts 7 and 8. They're also, fun fact, Spanish rabbis. I don't know if that matters a whole bunch or not. Rashi, we know, is from Franco-Germany. Rambam is in Northern Africa, and these two rabbis are in Spain. I'm not exactly sure how much this may or may not affect it. Maybe it does affect it a lot. What's really fascinating is they're taking it, and it's not as if they're ignorant of what we just read about Rashi and Rambam. And by the way, should anybody be questioning, Rashi and Rambam are no slouches, right? They are significant, Rashi and Rambam. They are major pillars of our post-Talmudic rabbinic tradition. And both of these Spanish rabbis in the 13th century directly quote Rashi, and we all know that Ramban knows Rambam, so he knows what he's going up against, and yet he goes directly against him and says, you know what? When this thing returns to its matter, the Yoshna, what is this, the Yoshna? Rashi says back to 10, Rambam says to 10. They said, no, not back to 10, back to 0.
Back to 0.
Yeah, both of them back to 0. Now it's fascinating because who's really to say what was the original? We don't really know the original state.
The original is 0.
Exactly. Who's exactly? Why is that the origin or origin? We don't. Anyways, but these Spanish rabbis have a problem with it. I don't know if there's something going on at the time. They're like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't. Who knows? Maybe in their culture, this was just really weird to see people drinking during mourning. Maybe this was just not something they're accustomed to. Hey there, I wanted to break in, and normally I would tell you, here's a sneak peek into our next episode. I got to tell you, we're going to be taking a break. That's right, the Jewish Drinking Show is going to be taking a break, an indefinite break. Who knows? It might come back next week, next month, next year. Who's really to say? It's time for me to take a break. This is episode 150. This is quite the big milestone. We're towards the end of 2023. We've been going on for 4 years strong. It's been a great ride, and I need a break. Whether that will be an indefinite break, whether it will come back, who's really to say? But I'm always open, whether you have comments, suggestions, ideas, or other directions content can take. I'm here. You can feel free to reach out to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. Thank you. And now back into this episode on mourning and drinking. Text 9, it was taught in the Babylonian Talmud. I'm not going to read all this. They return the matter how it used to be. What is this one word? Li Yoshna. We don't know. What is this one word? So Rashi says 10. What the Tur doesn't quote is Rambam also. Rashi and Rambam are no slouches. They're not insignificant rabbis in the course of tradition. Yet he then quotes Ramban. Yeah, but you can only drink during the meal because post-meal wine leads to getting drunk. V'chein amad davar. And that's what the people do. He then also quotes this 11th century Rabbi Isaac ben Judah ben Ibn Giyad, place where they're accustomed to console mourners with eggs and lentils, they feed them. A place with wine and meat, they feed them. Similarly, Ramban, okay, so, places where wine is part of it and can happen, you can read the rest of it. You can do the wine and the drinking, whatever it is, in the course of the meal, which is really fascinating because this is directly flying in the face of the Talmudic stuff and Rashi and Rambam. So there's like many centuries of rabbinic normative practice that when you're mourning, it is assumed, are drinking around the course of your meals. And as we saw Rabbi Ḥanin mentioned in the Talmud, it's going to help you. Like, it's going to help console, comfort the mourners, to help them get them through this week-long Shivah process. Maybe it'll help open them up, share memories, whatever it is. There's maybe some sort of catharsis that takes place. But now it becomes transformed because these 13th century Spanish rabbis say otherwise, and it gets here mentioned in the Tur. And then ultimately we get to texts 10 and 11 here.
Shulḥan Arukh YD 378a. As soon as the corpse is buried, he may eat meat and drink some wine during the meal in order to dissolve the food in his bowels, but he must not drink it to the full. Shulḥan Arukh saying, eat meat and drink some wine during the meal in order to dissolve the food, so like a purpose, but not drink to the full. So that like really put a stringency on it.
Yeah, and also it has also echoes of Rambam, where Rambam was capping it. He's like, he wants to accord to the 10, but he also doesn't want the drunkenness. This is like Ramban saying, yeah, don't do the drunkenness. Let's just go back to having no statutory, obligatory cups of wine during Shivah, but if it helps digest, we're not going to say you can't drink wine. There's nothing holding you back. Fine, it helps your digestion. It's a regular course of the meal. Fine, but don't get drunk off of it.
Shulḥan Arukh YD is even more stringent than that. Because the Shulḥan Arukh is saying, but he must not drink to the full.
Yeah.
So that's like adding in more stringency, even compared to like, if you want, you can. That's like, just enough to dissolve the food in the bowels, but don't drink to the full.
Right.
To put it into perspective, though, I don't know if somebody mentioned this earlier, but people drank wine back then like we drink Coke.
That's true.
And Diet Coke.
That's true.
So there's a whole different mentality.
When I was looking here, I saw people who said you can only drink during the meal.
Yeah.
I didn't see anyone who said you can't drink at all.
That's fair, actually. So that's a really good question. You're right. No one says you're not allowed to drink at all during Shivah, during this Avelos period. No one cuts it off entirely. The Aninut, yes, but once the person's in the ground, once the corpse is in the ground, the beloved that you're connected to, you're allowed to, right? The mace, right? You're allowed to. Rambam, I think, gives the clearest expression of this. Once they're in the ground, fine, mazel tov, you're allowed to drink.
Between the name and the Avelos.
Right, right. That's the trigger point. Once they're buried, then you're now in Avelut. But the question is, it's interesting because how do we characterize this period? Because as Rambam's language expresses, there's like almost like this permissibility. Like once you are allowed to bury them, once they're buried, now you're allowed to drink and have meat. Great. Now, what is the range of, exactly. What are the parameters of this drinking? So according to Rashi, you're allowed to drink. According to Rambam, you're allowed to drink, but you can't get drunk. You still have to do these statutory 10 cups or whatever it is, up to 10 cups. You just can't get drunk. And then Ramban and these Spanish rabbis are like, yeah, maybe we should be doing the drunkenness piece. And so they get really uncomfortable with it. This text 11, the locality where is the adopted custom, Okay, fine, there's this certain stuff. I am using this as an example of what I'm calling the post-Talmudic text 12. It's from our scroll. So the Oni may not eat meat nor drink wine. Okay, we already spoke about that. This is something that no one debates. Everybody agrees. This is clear cut, fine. But this is now moving on to the Avel, to someone who's in Shivah. Once the deceased is buried, the mourner is permitted to eat meat, which is clear echoes of Rambam and his Mishnah Torah. He may also drink a little wine during the meal to help digest his food, but he should not drink wine as a beverage. I don't understand this language of not drinking wine as a beverage. It sounds as a very...
Diet Coke, like Ari said.
I guess it's a very interesting verbal resonance. This is a footnote to that, which is someone cites Hagos Maimonios, stating that Mourner is required to eat meat. Someone disagrees. Point is, there's been all this ink spilled. Do you have to? Do you not have to? Can you? But ultimately, there's this weird gray area in Judaism, in sort of normative Jewish practice. Like, look, no one's going to confuse a Shivah house with an Irish wake, right? These are two vastly different post-death drinking experiences of cultural, with cultural expressions, right? And an Irish wake, there's probably Jameson galore, whiskey and beer, who knows? Bushmills, yeah, which no one is confusing with a Jewish, with a Shivah house. At the same time, look, when we think about a Shivah house, look, I know I've never seen at any Shivah house alcohol, but at the same time, would it, from what we've seen, and sure, even the more recent, and I'm saying recent as in the last 700 years, but in the last 700 years, the rabbinic expressions have been that, we should minimize the drinking. At the same time, it's not a full out, prohibition against drinking while in mourning. We see in the rabbinic era, it's, I wouldn't say valorized, but there is a clear value expression that while we are in mourning, this is a totally appropriate time to be drinking. Would we express it as drowning our sorrows, or maybe helping us express our emotions during this really troubling and tough times, right? And also, it's not inappropriate.